Welcome to this second edition of Deep Background live video coverage of the election in 2020. I'm Dave Helling with the Kansas City Star's editorial board, and John Shorman, the lead political reporter for the Star, joining me now. Well, John, we have some results to talk about, so let's dive right on in.
Let's do it.
Our Bollier is going to come up a little bit short. What's your view?
Yeah, so her very early returns did look very good for her. However, it does appear a lot of that was just that early returns. And as the count has continued, Marshall, I think a few minutes ago in the count, did kind of officially take the lead. Her Johnson County totals, I know that was something we talked about on the first segment a couple hours ago. I think she ended up with a 7-point margin of victory over Marshall in Johnson County with all the votes counted. That's probably, that's a good margin, but probably not quite what she needed out of Johnson County. So certainly we'll see how things progress, but at this point, Marshall seems to have the momentum now.
Okay, let's talk. First of all, for viewers watching online at kansascity.com, you can see results on a little crawl there at the bottom of the screen, and they're up to date as of about 10 or 15 minutes ago. And of course, at kansascity.com, you can get all the election results. One of the things we talked about at 7 o'clock in terms of Bollier's chances was Laura Kelly 2 years ago had 55% vote share, which was 17 points better than Chris Kobach, but you had to add in Greg Orman too. So in essence, she did plus 10 in Johnson County. Bollier plus 7, that's just not enough, right? Plus, Sedgwick County, which you talked about at 7 o'clock, Jonathan, the last time I looked, she was down about 5 points in Sedgwick County. Yeah. You lose Sedgwick by 5 and only Kerry Johnson by 7. You cannot match what Roger Marshall can do in the first district.
Yeah, which isn't to say this still won't be one of the most competitive
no question.
Senate races we've seen in Kansas.
Well, can I just throw this in quickly?
Yeah.
We don't have anything from Wyandotte County.
That's true.
And Wyandotte County will be big for Bollier. It's a Democratic county. It's probably the most Democratic county in the state of Kansas.
Right.
Probably not enough to bring her victory, but that will get close. And you're right, one of the closest races in Kansas history.
Yeah, I would say Wyandotte is probably still her last real best bet to gain large amounts of votes this evening in kind of a fell swoop. I did see earlier, I think Wyandotte County Clerk was reporting they had record turnout in that county. So that is one small sign of optimism you could find for Bollier. But you're right. I think the Johnson County numbers just aren't enough at this point.
Well, why do you think that is? Do you have any sense of that? I mean, she's from Johnson County, well known here, had plenty of money. I mean, the Democrats can't complain they were outspent or outworked. Is it just the tribalism that we're in, John? I mean, why would she not do better here?
I don't want to speculate too much
right.
without really having to dive in, but I think one thing I would be really kind of curious to see is, talking to voters, what kind of issues were important to them in terms of, were they tuned into some of these kind of issues that have kind of a state federal crossover, which is
right.
a lot of what Bollier focused on, which was things like Medicaid expansion and healthcare and some of these things that are kind of applicable at both in the state house and in Congress, or were other things on voters' minds that were purely federal, where I think Republicans probably tend to have a little bit more advantage in Kansas on the policy front, immigration, other kinds of issues of that sort that don't have as much kind of that really don't play out at the state level.
I'd make another observation, maybe another theory, and I think we're seeing this across the country as we watch all the returns come in, that there does seem to be some reversion to Republicans that may not have shown up much in the polls. You do get the sense, a lot of people thought this would be a Joe Biden wipeout tonight. It's not going to be that. Looks like Donald Trump's going to carry Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, places where you think the Democrat might be competitive. In fact, Tom Tillis might actually win that Senate race in North Carolina. So you put all that together, you get the sense that maybe at the end, particularly in a place with Johnson, like Johnson County, which remember has a great GOP history, there might have been just enough of a reversion to Republicans and Republicanism that Barb Boyer simply couldn't overcome.
Yeah, I think if you look at it from purely a national perspective, you could probably make a good argument that Donald Trump had his kind of lowest point of the cycle, perhaps in that kind of week where he was diagnosed with COVID-19 and was in the hospital, and that was also the week where I think there was some significant investigative reporting on his taxes and the like. And if that's the low point, you could probably make an argument where, you know, he's potentially had some recovery over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and possibly that has kind of helped some of these down ballot Republicans here in the final stretch.
We won't go too deeply into this, but just a quick glance at some of the state legislative races. It looks like Republicans have bounced back. We were a little worried maybe that, or at least considered that Democrats might be doing well in those races. But when the final returns came in, it did look as if the Senate and House candidates for the Republican Party have done pretty well. We'll examine that a little bit closer if we have some time in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's talk a little bit about Sharice Davids and Amanda Atkins, John, and then we'll go over to Missouri. The last returns I saw with Davids had her plus 5 or 6. That again would be worrisome, except you don't have Wyandotte County. And in this case, those Wyandotte County votes are extraordinarily important because the 3rd district is basically Wyandotte County and Johnson County, a little bit of Miami. So we expect her to get close to her margin over Kevin Yoder of 2 years ago. You think that's right?
Yeah, I haven't seen any kind of danger signs for Representative Davids tonight at all. And I think traditionally this isn't true of all races, but correct me if you think I'm wrong, Dave. You know, I think that this kind of first re-election campaign for a congressman or a congresswoman tends to be kind of the most difficult, if you will. So if she can handle this relatively easily, even if it's a little bit of a smaller margin, she should be fine.
I think one of the lessons we'll draw when the final returns are in, at least on the Kansas side, is the 3rd district is purpler than it used to be, but not overwhelmingly purple. I mean, not 60-40, not, some huge 20-point margin. It does look like Davids will win. It does look like Boyer will have a plurality, but not enough to get over the hump statewide. And it does look like Joe Biden will win the presidential election in that district, which is not a surprise. But there's a huge difference in politics, right, John, between 52 or 53% and 60 or 61%. I mean, that's the difference between a blowout and a squeaker.
Yeah, and I think where that kind of margin really helps you if you're a Democrat is in the state house. And certainly this was a key cycle because the officials elected this time will play a key role in redistricting here in a couple of years and determining how that plays itself out. So it really is a year where every single seat Democrats can pick up, even if no one expects them to retake either chamber of the state legislature. Right. But there was discussion about, and perhaps still is some discussion about taking away the Republican supermajority in one or both chambers, which would obviously kind of increase their leverage going into redistricting.
Yeah, and the other thing we have to think about is Laura Kelly is on the ballot in 2 years, and so the incentives for Republicans in the state legislature to be obstinate, even more obstinate than normal, may be very high. And at the same time, Kelly, who's been trying to triangulate this stuff for a long time, will have an interesting decision whether to sort of go full partisan or try to make deals. That's going to be just a fascinating dynamic in Kansas going forward. Okay, let's go to Missouri with the time we have left. The Secretary of State's website is not updating very much, so I have no idea where these results are coming from, But at least at kansascity.com, we're reporting that the race is basically tied. Again, though, don't we think that's based on numbers from urban areas, and that Governor Parson will win relatively easily this evening?
Well, I think maybe relatively easy seems to be is still to be determined, but I think those results are coming from Associated Press. They are running well ahead of what we see on the Secretary of State's website,
Yes.
which is unfortunate. But what I think you're seeing is kind of Galloway's. She did have some early advantage out of the early vote, but kind of as the election day returns are coming in, you're now seeing it's at the point where they're essentially tied right now. But I would expect kind of Parson to expand that margin as we go forward over the next hour or so.
Okay, let's end up the same way we ended up the first discussion. And by the way, we'll be back at 11 o'clock with what we hope will be a pretty good wrap on what's happened today. But at the 9 o'clock hour, I think there are more nervous Democrats tonight, Jonathan, than maybe we thought there was going to be on the presidential level. I mean, you lose. I don't think they thought they were going to win every state, but it would have been an early evening if you carry Florida, if you carry North Carolina, if you carry Ohio, which may be slipping away. And yet it does look like Pennsylvania is going to be huge.
Yeah, and the difficulty there, obviously, is that of all states, Pennsylvania is probably the one where we're most likely to have to wait for a few days to get definitive results. So everyone should, I just urge everyone to kind of be patient, as we've been saying this whole week. Whatever the situation is at the end of the evening tonight is may or may not be definitive in terms of the actual official results we'll get later. And certainly Pennsylvania might end up playing a pretty key role.
All right. Keep your eyes on kansascity.com for the latest returns. And again, we'll be back at 11 o'clock in a couple of hours. I'm going to do some stuff for Fox 4, but we'll be back at 11 o'clock with what we hope will be a pretty good wrap up. And by the way, we're going to try and have some of the speeches from the candidates here at kansascity.com. So if you want to catch some of that and what they're having to say as these votes become finalized, be sure and tune in for that. Jonathan, thanks. See you in a couple of hours. I'm Dave Helling with the Star's editorial board. You've been on Deep Background.